And now, everyone, please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to your host, John Yandell.
All right, all right. How's everybody doing? Full Sail, all right? Cool. We're so great to have you guys here on campus with us. We also want to make sure we welcome our online streaming viewers today. We're so grateful that you've come to be here, a part of our mixed breakdown with Jordan Young, DJ Swivel. Let's give him a hand.
Thanks for having me.
And we're doing the mixed breakdown of the Chainsmokers Coldplay song, Something Just Like This. So very excited for that. Thanks for being here, Jordan. We really appreciate it every year that you're here. Swivel, man,
I love
great.
being here.
Great.
My favorite week of the year.
Awesome.
It's a busy one, but it's fun.
Yeah, it's fun, man, just to have that interaction with the students and to just find out some of the stuff you're doing and what you've learned in your lifetime in terms of being in the industry, and what you can share with them is always classic, always great. So to start off today, why don't we just give a little bit of background? So maybe give a little bit of your pathway when you graduated Full Sail. What happened? Where did you go? How did you get to Chainsmokers?
The Cliff Notes, yeah. So I graduated recording arts in 2005, and I moved straight to New York. I knew I wanted to be in New York. I'd sort of grown up on hip-hop, and I wanted to work with those artists. And I was actually talking with career development, and the internship that I sort of credit to the rest of my career was found through career development. And I got this internship with Duro. And Duro owned a record company called Desert Storm. He had signed Fabulous, and his partner was DJ Clue. So he was in the mix on everything. And he's also, aside from having his record label, he has a studio, and he's an incredible mix engineer. So I started interning for him, and I was sort of, an unpaid internship. I did 7 months. I was doing 100 hours a week, living at the studio. And then about 7 months into it, his artist Fabulous started working on his next album. And I had put in so much time, I sort of just asked him if I could engineer the project, and eventually he let me do it. And and that was sort of my first engineering gig, and then that led to a second album that I co-mixed with Duro. And then, just through relationships that you build, I connected with Beyonce somehow and worked with her for a few years. And then
awesome.
Same way I connected with the Chainsmokers, and then been working with them for a few years. So now I'd started in New York, and now I live in LA, and yeah, that's kind of the path.
What prompted the move from New York to LA? Was there anything industry-wise that was going on that made you move, or what was that?
Yeah, a little bit. It was a combination of industry stuff and personal stuff. Through the 10 years I'd spent in New York, I mean, I love New York as a city, but it became almost unsustainable for musicians. I mean, you saw all the studios were closing, and just the rents were going up like crazy. And quite frankly, most of my friends that I had met in New York and built relationships with, they had all already moved to LA. Now I only have like 2 or 3 friends left in New York.
Wow.
So I felt like it was time, and it felt like it was getting stagnant, so I just packed up and moved, and yeah. And then it was the best decision, because it sort of made me start over again and reset. And that sort of forces you to work a little harder and gives you a new sort of motivation. And
you kind of had to start networking all over again too, a little bit, right? Like once you got
yeah,
out there.
I mean, I had a lot of relationships, but yeah, you got to kind of, you just got to rebuild. You got to rebuild your immediate network in a new city, and
right.
Yeah, it seems to have worked out. So.
Now you, when you left New York, you went to LA, and then you started a company there. Is that where Skio started, or was that something different?
So it was actually all the same process. I was like getting out of a, pretty awful relationship, and so I needed a full reset on life. And I actually went and visited some friends of mine in Vancouver, who are some of the most brilliant people I know. They work in quantum computing, actually. And I was just hanging out, kind of just getting a breather on life and getting some good advice from them. And one of their wives was basically an executive at an ad agency, and they were doing some investing in new tech startups. And so one of the startups that came in was a music company, and she was like, you're in town, do you want to just come and vet this company for me? So I came as a representative of the ad agency. It's called DDB. And they brought this company in, brand new company. They had just kind of started, and they had these really brilliant ideas on how to address music licensing. So I don't know if any of you are, I'm sure a lot of you are producers, you're making tracks, you're doing remixes, then you post something up on SoundCloud and you get a takedown notice. Has anybody ever had that happen? Anybody? At least a few people, yeah. So it's an issue that we all deal with. Music licensing is complicated, and they had come up with an idea of how to make it a lot easier for the average person who doesn't have a great lawyer or access to artist management and things like that. So what I actually just invested and came on as a co-founder very early on, and yeah, now we've been building it for 3 years. It's called Skio Music. I'm wearing a shirt right now. You can't see it, but it's skiomusic.com, and now we've built our marketplace has over 100,000 producers in 180 countries now.
Awesome.
And so yeah, it's really been growing, and now we're going to get out of just remixing and start adding other license types like sync licensing. So
very cool.
for you video creators, if you want to add, you know, a song from a major label into one of your videos and not have to worry about the ad revenue thing and all that, you can just get an easy license. So that's our goal, to simplify that whole process.
Now, are you also doing where students can log into your website and then they can download stems to mix kind of thing?
Yeah, so there's a whole marketplace of stems right now for remixing. So you can go on, and some of them are for free, some of them are maybe $5 or whatever, and you can get the stems. So if you want an amazing a cappella or remix a track, you can go on there. It's the licenses are legal, and you get all the stems, and you're directly connected with the artists. And we do a lot of great remix contests with some major artists. So yeah, constantly growing. So
very cool, very cool.
Exciting thing. So I sort of juggle, half my life is that, and half my life is making records.
Very cool. Well, let's get to the making records part of it then. So explain a little bit how you came into your connection with the Chainsmokers, and then how this particular project came into being.
So it's really funny. All Skio, Chainsmokers, all this happened at the same time about 3 years ago. So Chainsmokers I met in New York. Honestly, their manager had, Adam, had just reached out to me online on my website. He was referred by another A&R up at Columbia that I'm good friends with, and he reached out and he said, "Hey, I'd just love you to meet my guys, and we want to sort of have somebody in there to help them finish these records and get the mixes sounding right." So I just met them on some friends kind of thing, and we clicked, and we're all about the same age, and we like the same things, and I mixed one record, and then I moved to LA, and then a few months later, the second record they gave me was "Don't Let Me Down."
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So yeah, and then we kind of, the success built off of that.
Very cool.
Really, yeah.
Now, how is Coldplay connected to this particular song?
So the way the Coldplay thing happened, when we started the record a little over a year ago, year and a bit, Drew went and did a session with Chris. Chris invited him to do a session, and they just wrote. And they started the ideas of this song, and then Drew went and did the production, and then, you know, the band added all of their elements, and yeah, it just came together. It was, I think it started with Chris wanting to collaborate, actually.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, so great moment for me. I'd actually worked with Chris prior while I was with Beyonce, but this was the first time that you know, he specifically asked for me to mix the record based on Closer. He liked that. So, and then I have since actually worked with him a few other times, both on his record and on the Coldplay album, and a song that he wrote for Dua Lipa. I did a couple of mixes for him this year. So.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, let's break the song down a little bit. Show us a little bit about what you have going on, things that you find of interest.
Yeah, so I figure maybe the easiest way, I'm sure you all know the song, or most of you, many of you, yeah. So I can start breaking it down, or I can play the song and then break it down. What would you guys want to do? You want to hear the song? All right.
Play it.
So we'll run it down, and then I'll sort of go through what's going on in here. So.
I've been reading books of old, the legends and the myths, Achilles and his gold, Hercules and his gifts, and Spider-Man's control, and Batman with his fists, and clear see myself upon that list. But she said, where'd you wanna go? How much you wanna risk? I'm not looking for somebody with some superhuman gifts, some superhero, some fairy tale bliss. Just something I can turn to, somebody I can kiss. I want something just like this. Oh, I want something just like this. And the myths, the testaments they told, the moon and its eclipse, and Superman unrolls the suit before he left. But I'm not the kind of person that it fits. She said, where'd you wanna go? How much you wanna risk? I'm not looking for somebody with some superhuman gifts, some superhero, some fairy tale bliss. Just something I can turn to, somebody I can miss. I want something just like this. I want something just like this. Oh, I want something just like this. Where'd you wanna go? How much you wanna risk? I'm not looking for somebody with some superhuman gifts, some superhero, some fairy tale bliss. Just something I can turn to, somebody I can kiss. I want something just like this.
Nice.
Yeah, woohoo! All right.
Thank you. So normally when I do these things, especially in an environment like this, it's going to be hard to hear every little nuance of a dB of EQ here and whatnot. So I'll probably just break down all of the different elements of the song, try to identify a few things like vocals where there's a lot of work being done, and then maybe we do some Q&A and really, I'm here to answer your guys' questions. So what's interesting to you? And I don't always know, to be honest. So, let me just run through a few of the things. So obviously, we have our drums up here. I like to organize sessions where I have all my drums at the top, then my bass elements, and then musical elements, and then lead vocals and background vocals. So that's kind of how all of my sessions run. And yeah, we'll just go through and listen to each of the elements. And so in the hook, we have a nice big kick. So there's like another layer of a clap underneath this one. Little percussion element there. We have some fills that are going on. here. And then things like, crashes and transition sounds that help break up every couple measures. So that's really all that's happening with the drums and the hook. It's really not all that complicated. So moving down in the hook, we have 2 bass layers. And I think I've just got a CLA bass on it. It's got a little chorus. There's a little distortion and a little kind of compression and EQ. But it's really just kind of filling it out a bit. And then we have a double of the MIDI, but obviously a different instrument, also slightly different settings on the CLA bass. But these kind of together make the bass sound. And of course, that's all side-chained, though that was done in the Ableton session. So when I got the stems, the sidechain was already printed onto it.
Gotcha.
So yeah, again, drums, bass, and then let me just go down here, and we should have the lead synth instruments. So there's actually an acoustic guitar in the hook. It is really there for some texture that I think Chris played. And all I've got on that is a little sidechain, little pumping on it. And then we have the main synth lead, which just has a little brightness on the EQ, some kind of low mids there, and there's an automated filter that I think kicks in towards the end of the hook. So, right, and that's just to help transition into the next verse. Otherwise, it's just too much bright stuff, and then it's hard to hear Chris's vocal when it comes back in. Let's see what else. There's another synth that's layered. And I'm actually not doing anything to that. So one of the biggest problems I see in, new mixers, when I look at some of their sessions and work is and especially when I get demos, there's just too much happening. There's a lot of plugins and just a lot of extra things happening that I find, when you actually go through and try and decipher what the decision making is, it's not really doing a whole lot. And sometimes I find, when I go through most of my sessions, a lot of the sounds will not have anything on them. Because if the producer did a good job and it's well produced, I shouldn't really have to do a whole lot. It's only when there's a problem when I have to start addressing things with a lot of plugins. So you'll see there's a bunch of tracks that don't have anything on them in here.
So in the process, are you eliminating any tracks that are sent to you, or are you just leaving everything the producer sent to you? Do you decide to...
Sometimes. It really depends on the song. So, right. With the Chainsmokers, I've built a really strong relationship with them where, I'm really helping on a lot of the production work. And so I'm listening to the song as it's being produced, and, I'll hear an early demo and I'll say, change that, or let's fix this kick drum, or let's get decisions are made along the way. Yeah. And this whole album, I was in with them every day producing all the vocals, and as Drew's working on tracks and I'm mixing, he'll come in, hey, I have this idea, what do you think? And then we'll adjust it. And so the whole time, even before I get the stems and I'm working on it from the mix perspective in Pro Tools, there's a lot of conversations happening about how the records should sound before that.
Sure,
so,
yeah, that's great.
So generally speaking, when it gets to me here, I should just be tweaking and fixing, but the large brush strokes have already been made. They're already on the canvas here. So let me see. And then the second half of the drop has this other sound. So playing off the main sound. So that was a whole other sound. And I've got the same filter on that at the end, and then again a little brightness, and I've got some stereo spreading. I love this Vitalizer plugin. I use it all the time, and I like nice wide mixes. I like vocals in the center, and I like everything else to kind of wrap around that. So I'm often using this plugin, and just this little knob here will give me some width on everything.
Right.
And then I think there's just a couple, ear candy sounds that happen. It's real simple. Yeah, I don't know what that is, just a one-note synth thing. And then there's a filtered piano in the second half. So, and why don't we just listen to how all that music plays together. Right? So that's basically everything that makes up the hook. And there might be a few other sounds, like there's a vocal, little effect vocal thing, which Chris's engineer, Bill, sent to me. That's just Chris doing a little vocal. He put a bunch of reverb and delay on it. Easy. And so then getting into the verse, the reason I skipped the first verses is kind of, essentially it's just building up to everything else. Well, why don't I just go through what's in the beginning? There's not a whole lot of drums. There's some percussion sounds in the first verse here. And I think I've just got a delay on that, some compression, a little dotted eighth note delay, and then a devil lock adding some saturation and distortion. And then I think there's a little, reverb. So all my reverb returns, sorry I'm jumping around here, but this is kind of like how I mix. I'm constantly jumping around. Oh, I hear something there. Let me go address that. All of my reverb and delay returns I have down here. And this is kind of a template that I usually start with, and then I'll start modifying for every song. But I usually have 4 reverbs, a large hall, a plate. This is like basically a very bright, sizzly, long tail reverb. And then I have a room sound. And I don't often use them all, but they're there just in case so that my workflow just moves. And then I have a few delays. This is just a simple eighth note delay. I have a little spread on it. I use this for vocals a lot. So when I'll send a vocal to a delay, the reason I have the spread on it is so when it comes back, it's not landing right in the middle on top of the vocal. Now I've got some spread. So it's kind of like hitting in the middle, the lead vocal, and then the return will kind of get out of the way and it'll be on the sides. Same with the long delay. I think this is probably a quarter note. Yeah, same thing, quarter note. And I've got some, filtering happening on it and all that. And then I'll have a slap delay and a doubler for just vocal width stuff. And then these couple throws, which I use. These are more custom delays that sound a little different. They might be filtered differently. They might be lo-fied. And I use these for, usually on a vocal, like the last line of a chorus or something, I'll have a delay that kind of jumps out. And you'll see when we get through the vocals, that's there. And then I have this other reverb, which I don't know where I'm using in this session, but we're going to figure it out. I forgot.
Seen that name a lot.
Yeah. So musically in the intro, we have this Wurlitzer sound. Nothing's on it. Oh. Then we have this like mallet sound, which has some compression stuff happening, and then a little filtering happening on it as well, which is automated. I guess it's probably automated at the end here. Oh, no, it's automated in the middle. I guess when the verse starts, okay.
Achilles and his gold, Achilles and his gifts, Spider-Man's control, and
and then it gets brighter in the second half there. What else? This is just the drop synth that's filtered out, just for the intro. And we sort of put that there just to introduce the theme of it, so when you hear it later, it sounds familiar. And then we have a guitar. So I've made it a little brighter and spread it out as wide as I could. with this. I don't know if you guys are going to pick that up on here, but it's definitely happening. And then I added one little sound. So this was actually a pitched up vocal delay from Chris that I sort of put at the end of the song, and then I thought it would make sense to add in the beginning, which is just this sound. So it's kind of the first thing you hear, and it's just an echo of when Chris says something just like this, it's just this pitched up an octave with a bunch of reverb on it and a delay that just continues and never ends. Yeah, okay. So that's all that. I just want to see if there's there's a few other interesting things in the track that we'll go over, and then I'll get to the vocals. Let me see here. We've gone through most of the drums. In the second verse, we have a live kick in there. So that's our main kick is now a live kick. And then again, there's like some other production element or percussion elements that don't have much on it. So let me get straight to the instruments.
So most of the drums are sampled in?
No, actually there is live drums. Every member of the band there's live bass, there's live drums, and there's live guitar.
Okay,
so it really was it wasn't Chris Martin and Chainsmokers, it was Coldplay and Chainsmokers. So the whole band was involved.
Yep.
And making sure everybody on both sides is happy was one of the challenges of this mix, because everybody's got a different opinion, and they're all valid, and we want to make sure that everybody gets their moment on the record. And so that can sometimes be a challenge to, like, how do you make everybody fit in? It's, a song's only 4 minutes long. But we managed to figure it out, and I think everybody was pretty happy with the result.
Sometimes that's hard to do even within a band by itself, much less a collaboration.
Yeah, and now we're adding some DJs, and so... but I think what we got was a really good amalgamation of both. So these 4 yellow tracks are all the live drums, and they were just sent as stems from their engineer.
Gotcha.
And I'm, I have some distortion, saturation stuff on it, a little studio reverb, and then just some EQ stuff. And those layers, I think it's, this is just a toms layer and an overheads layer. So that's a toms layer, which is really just becomes a room, basically.
Right.
And then an overheads layer. And then at the end, we have a kick layer and some other things. So I'll just play you the live drum layers at the end. So now we've added a kick. And then in the outro, one of the challenges was there was a lot going on. And so we opted to get rid of most of the drums, and we're just using the overheads in the end. Right? And that was so, we have the drop drums, the program drums happening there, and so we don't need any of the other stuff. And we did similar things with the bass. So for example, the 2 basses that I played you in the hook, that's kind of locking everything in, but then we wanted to incorporate a live bass. And so this was one of the other challenges, is do we use a whole live bass performance, or do we use a bit of both? And what I opted to do was a bit of both. So what you'll see here is, this is the whole bass performance, the program stuff. This is the live bass performance. And I'm willing to bet that if I go through these playlists, I've got, a ton of different iterations of what, lengths of how much is being used on it. That's the whole performance. And we opted for this. So you get some of the bounce of the live bass and the organicness of it, but then you have the program bass that locks you into the groove. So you get the live thing in those middle sections, but on the kick and the snare, we're getting the original bass that just makes it impact, the way that we wanted. So that's there, and then in the bridge we have a ton of piano stuff happening. This was a piano that Chris recorded. This is sort of our main piano throughout the song, and then in the bridge we have 19 pianos because we just felt like, why not? What it actually was is Chris had a few layers, and some of them harmonized each other, and then Drew had his layer, and so they all actually worked pretty well together. Let me see if I can go through each one. So this was one of Chris's pianos. right? So those together make one. Then we filter in this bridge piano so it builds in. Low octave, right? And then here's our more synthy ethereal pianos. So together they all seem to work and create this really lush piano section in the bridge and final hook there. And let's see, is there any, there's a few sounds, not really doing much processing on them, but, an ARP sound and what else? This last drop synth, I think we've already gone through this. Yeah, that's that. And then we have all the live guitar stuff. So I think that should cover all the band, and then we can sort of get into the vocals here. And the live guitar performance throughout. We've already heard that one. Right, a little more aggressive one there. And then we have this one in, I think, the hook. Or rather, this is the bridge build-up. What's happening on there? A little bit of EQ, taking out some of the low end, spreading it out wide, and I think there's a sidechain on it. And then here's basically our final drop. And let me just go through each of those layers. So we have an acoustic and an electric layered.
That's nice.
And then a synth that supports it. So we have some chords underneath, and then the main lead one, which was actually from a band rehearsal that we pulled in when they were going to perform it live, and their guitar, it's Johnny, I think. He played it in the band rehearsal, and they record all the rehearsals. They were like, "Oh, that's great," and we just pulled that in. So that's why you can hear some drums in it, right? So basically, this was done in the studio, this was done in the studio, and then that middle section here, just for the last hook that I'm highlighting, was from a band rehearsal. So we just kind of put that all into one and made a cool performance out of it. Cool. And there's a few other layers that I'll just play you. We have a vocal pad at the end. Again, simple EQ stuff. You'll see there's not a lot of really crazy effects. It's usually just balance, panning, and a little EQ. And then at the end, this is that kind of delay that I created, and that just kind of loops all the way through the final hook there. Other than that, we have some basic risers and transition effects that, not really a whole lot of need to go through. But, yeah. Right, just to build into the next section, we all know what those do. And then we'll get to the vocals, because there's a lot going on there. So this is kind of how I treat a lot of my vocals generally. You can see there's a lot of plugins on it. They're all doing very small things. There's a little AT, but it's so low, it's really, that doesn't even need to be on there. It was just to catch a couple little minor things. And at this point, people's ears are programmed to hear perfect pitch. And Chris is amazing. He really doesn't need it. But just sometimes having it on there, even light, just keeps everything in a familiar place for a pop listener. So I usually start with de-essing. I can take everything off the vocal here, including the AT, and you'll hear.
The legends and the myths, Achilles and his gold, Achilles and his gifts.
So there's all my FX sends. I have a large hall on there, that sizzly reverb that I talked about, a long delay that's not too loud. Just hear a subtle delay in the back just to give it some life. And then there's a slap delay and a doubler that are just putting some spread on the vocal. But let me bypass all that, and we'll just go through the main effects processing. So there's a bit of de-essing, which isn't, it's only catching a few little S's that come out. He's not too sibilant when he sings, so you don't really need a whole lot there. I have an SSL channel on it, a little bit of compression, about 4-to-1 ratio or so, and it's brightened up a bit.
I've been reading books of old, the legends and the myths, Achilles and his gold.
So that just kind of brings the vocal out front. Then I have another compressor, and I'm actually crushing it. Normally I don't do this, but for some reason on this vocal I felt like because his octave was low, I wanted it to be very present.
I've been reading books of old, the legends and the myths, Achilles and his gold.
You can see how that compressor just makes his vocal like right in your face. Yeah. And then I have this vitalizer on it, which is just adding a little bit of kind of a sibilant frequency.
I've been reading books of old, the legends and the myths.
Makes it a little brighter. And then I don't normally put this on a vocal, but I did. I think it was an accident, and I just kind of liked what it did. So
I've been reading books of old, the legends and the myths.
Just kind of cutting out some of the low-end stuff because his voice is so low and dealing with some of the extra sibilants. Yep. And then I have just another, sometimes I'll add like 3 de-essers on a vocal track, and it's not because I need 3. It's more, sometimes each of them are dealing with a different frequency, and sometimes they're only catching one thing in the entire performance. And rather than trying to, automate something to do it, I'll just put a de-esser on it that's very low. As you can see, I'm not taking much off, but I think there's 1 or 2 things that he does that this addresses. So you're not really going to hear anything there. And then this seems redundant, right? But this comes down to workflow. I think this last SSL channel was added because in the middle of the mix, we had, somebody wants the vocal to sound like this, somebody wants to sound like this, and then rather than me changing the original thing because we were going back and forth, it was just easier to add another SSL channel, and all that's doing is taking some 200 hertz out, some low-mid weird stuff, and a tiny bit of 8K. So that normally wouldn't be there. So that's kind of how I'm treating the lead vocals. Each of them are going to be slightly different, but effectively they're kind of doing the same thing.
Where'd you wanna go? How much?
Now he's in a higher octave here, so I don't have to deal with as much of the low frequency stuff. Right. So now another thing you'll notice is even after I'm processing it and compressing it and it's in your face, I still do another layer of vocal rides, which is post effects, to make sure every single syllable is the perfect volume. And on top of that, going into the compressor, you'll see each of these, cuts. This is a breath, this is whatever. I have gain automation on it. So everything hitting the compressor is at an equal volume. Then it goes through the compression. And then on some of them, I'm even doing some additional vocal rides just to get a performance to sound organic. It's not about every word sounding the same volume. It's about every word sounding the same volume against the track. So if something happens in the track here that makes it a little louder, well, my vocal might have to come up just a little bit just to sound equal to where a more empty part of the track, right? So I'm going through and doing a lot of that, and that's all just hand riding a fader. And I'm similarly doing that on the background vocals here, which I'll quickly play. Not a ton of backgrounds. There's a few things. Chris did like a double and kind of a left and right thing.
She said, where'd you wanna go? How much you wanna risk? I'm not looking for somebody with some superhero.
So that's the raw vocal.
Some superhero, some fairy tale bliss, just something I can turn to.
It's really mostly lead, but the backgrounds are there just to support the lead. And they run throughout. This track here, I'll just quickly play. It's when he does the little vocal melody. And that's just got some tape on it, and it's being crushed on an RVox. And there was already some processing on it when they gave it to me as well.
Let me ask a hardware question real quick.
Yeah.
So you said you rode the fader. Are we speaking literally? Do you actually have a fader that you actually use when you're writing the vocal? Or
Yeah. So when I did this song, where was I at? Westlake. Actually, I started this mix at home, and then I was at Westlake, and I finished it at Westlake. So in this case, quite frankly, I might have just had it in, in trim automation and on touch, and then I might have been doing it on my mouse, or or having like just a little.
You didn't know if you had something set up at home, or you had a little fader port.
Yeah,
or
not really.
like
Yeah,
that
not
too,
really.
like
Honestly, sometimes I'm just kind of doing it with my mouse, and it's pretty easy. And sometimes I'll draw it in. And yeah, if I have a fader port or I'm on a duality or something that can record the automation, I'll do it that way. So I usually don't. I'm not a gear guy. So anybody asks me stuff about gear, I really don't care. I don't care about plugins. I don't care about anything. I only care about the things that make me comfortable to mix. Because at the end of the day, whether you use UAD stuff or Wave stuff, I mean, everybody makes great plugins at this point. It comes down to your workflow and how you're going to work the easiest. And if you have to learn a new plugin every time because someone says it's a great plugin, like you're doing less mixing and you're just kind of trying to figure out how to work this plugin. So for me, you'll see I use a lot of the same things because most of a mix is EQ, compression, and balance, and volume, and pan. And so I don't need all these extra toys doing things. One, a lot of times that stuff is done in the production process. And when it gets to me, I really just, my job is to take something from here and just elevate it and fix some of the issues.
Right.
But I'm not a gear guy. I don't care about gear. None of that stuff excites me. Like I'm an ear guy.
Well, it's always nice to
It's
find
all
out,
about taste.
where people are going in terms of using hardware these days. Like, especially people that are mixing full time. Are they making use of things like the Raven? Are they just doing it all in the box? Are they doing?
I love the Raven. I just bought one of those for a studio that I just did, and it's great, but I don't need it. This was what I mixed this song on: a laptop. I have my iLock here, and I use a Duet at home. I'm using a more travel interface today, but that's it. And a good pair of speakers. I use some Genelec 8351s, which I love. That's the only piece of gear that I really care about is speakers.
Sure.
But the entire mix was done on this laptop, just like this, with no gear, in my house. So that's it. It doesn't require much anymore.
Very cool.
Everything is done this way.
Whatever makes the hit, right?
Exactly. So I'll just quickly run through the backgrounds and then we'll jump to Q&A. So if anybody does have a question, we'll be there in 2 minutes, so you can probably start preparing them. So one thing that's interesting here on these doo-doo-doos, I have 2 different auxes that are returning the same thing, and they're processed differently. So it's a little parallel processing happening here. So I have the main one, which is just a cleaner vocal. He's very close mic'd, so you get that presence in his voice, but it's mixed relatively cleanly. And then I have this other one, which is saturated. And what am I doing to do that? That's just simple vocal stuff, getting the vocal sounding right. And then, I have this soft tube saturation knob, and then running that through a reverb. So that's why you get this echoey, distorted thing. And then with both. And together, those 2 layers, just breathe some new life into it and give it a new characteristic sonically. Couple other backgrounds. I think these are just some Chris doubles similar to before. And I've got them the left and right panned 100, 100, and then actually I wanted to keep this. There was one mono vocal that I wanted to keep out of the way of the lead because he doubles the lead so well, and I've got a doubler on that. So that's just taking a mono vocal.
Oh, I want something just like that.
And just kind of pushing it off to the side so the lead vocal has space to breathe and is the main focal point. And then there's some other backgrounds. This is from, I think Will's got some backgrounds here. I actually have a couple backgrounds here, and Chris does as well.
The kind of person that it fits. Where'd you wanna go? How much you wanna risk?
Little harmony.
Where'd you wanna go? How much you wanna risk?
That's Will, and then I actually have two backgrounds that are just like doing a brighter layer. So I'm not reinventing the wheel here, it's just adding a texture that I didn't get out of them.
Where'd you wanna go? How much you wanna risk?
I'm a horrible singer, but there's a lot of autotune on it. And the purpose of it is just to add that high texture. And when you listen to it in context, it's very low. It's just about making those harmonies stand out just a little bit more. And so that falsetto-y sound helps it cut through as opposed to a lower octave vocal. So, and that just happens like throughout the song a couple moments. So in context, you can barely hear it, but it does support, adds a little brightness to it. And that's basically the whole mix. I mean, there's definitely some other things going on in here, but I figure I would leave it to you guys to let me know what's interesting about this or not about this. I love coming back so I can talk to you guys and find out, what are the questions that you have. Some of you might be graduating soon. Some of you are just getting into class. So what are your concerns starting out your program? What are your concerns when you're leaving? So I really want to be here for that and be able to answer all of those things.
So just a quick real show of hands. How many recording arts grads do we have here? Cool. How many music production grads do we have here? All right, so a good mix. That's great.
Good mix. Anybody from neither of those programs?
A few of those film
Okay,
guys.
a couple people.
Cool. Yep.
Awesome.
So the mics are open here on either side. So if any guys have any questions or would like to come up and ask, please step up to the mic and come on up. Form a little line, whatever you need. Saw this one first.
Let's start with you. Let me know what program you're in, your name.
My name is Emmanuel Lewis. I'm in recording arts.
Awesome.
And what do you think you do to set yourself apart from the other audio professionals?
Mixers and so one of the things that I do that I've become more comfortable with is when I started my career, I wanted to be a producer. I didn't come to Full Sail to necessarily be an engineer. I came to learn about engineering and that so that I could be a better producer. And then when I got into the industry, I thought, well, I should intern at a studio because that's going to get me closer to artists and blah, blah, blah. And what I found out is learning the craft of engineering and mixing made me an infinitely better producer, like by far. And so now, since I started as a producer, now when I mix, I add a lot of those production elements to a song that other mixers might not want to do or may not have the ear for and whatnot. So it's not just about mixing now. I'm directing the vocal performances and adding background vocals. I make sure I'm very careful about where and when I do it. But I know most mixers aren't going to go and do that. I'll have no problem changing drums. On the Chainsmokers album, there's a song that I wrote on, and that wasn't because I was asked to come in and write. That was because, the song needed some help in some certain areas, and I started humming a melody, and Drew really liked it, and then he added some lyrics to that, and it was just part of the collaborative process. So I think what separates me is my ability to act as both producer and mixer at the same time. And other people do that too, but not everybody does it. So, yeah. Thanks. Jump over here.
Hi, I'm
Hey.
Wesley Coleman.
How's it going?
I'm recording arts. And I was just wondering, when you're doing all these layers, like with vocals and different synth parts, how do you typically handle the pan situation? Do you keep them in the same way, or do you widen them out?
Yeah, so it really just depends. I mean, a lot of this is coming from Drew, from the Chainsmokers. So he'll produce an Ableton, and he's already going to have some panning on some things and whatnot. And I'm sure if I went through, there's probably some let me see, pan left. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these are stereo things, but clearly there's, on this guitar, there's some panning. There's some actually automated things on single notes where this note needs to move out of the way or something like that. It's too far over. This vocal glitch thing kind of goes from left to right. So this is just the left pan, and if we show the right, it's probably doing the opposite of that. Yeah, at the end of the day, I try to keep drums generally, at least kick, snare, in the center, bass in the center, and lead vocals in the center. And those three things kind of make up the core of the record. And then everything else I try to wrap around it in some way. Some will be more spread out, some will be a little more narrow. But those three elements generally don't fight with each other as much. Unless you have 5 kick drums and 3 808s, which I get quite often. Then you've got to, and then a bass, and then you got to figure out how to make those work together. But if you can get the kick and the bass working together, and then you have your snare and your lead vocal, and those things are all center on top of each other, they usually shouldn't fight if it's done correctly. And then everything else that is fighting for space and fighting for frequency range, you can push those off to the side. And so all the backgrounds on this song happen to be 100-100 because I don't have tons of stacks, but like on a Beyonce mix, for example, where I have 25 background vocals, I might do 100-100, 80-80, 60-60, 40-40. You know, I spread them all around so that each of them sort of occupy a different space in the mix. That's one way of addressing background vocals. I find that if everything is panned 100-100 and you have a lot of backgrounds, then it's almost too separated. So you still want to glue it all together. And then with synths and guitars and things like that, I just try to find, you know, if one guitar is off to the side and then I have another instrument that kind of occupies a similar space, if one's off to the left, the other might be a little off to the right. And it won't be 100%, it might be 50%. But then giving that little separation, your ear is going to hear both of those a lot easier. So that's kind of how I address it. But every song's different, but if you kind of take those tips and then apply it to your record, it'll kind of give you a good starting point of where everything should sound. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for
And
the question.
you'll pull like guitar solos and synth solos will kind of still come to the center though, right? A little bit.
Typically, it really depends on the song. If I have, if there's quite frankly, there isn't often where I'm dealing with a guitar solo.
These days, right?
It just doesn't really happen all that often in pop music anymore. But yeah, I mean, it might be 20 off to the left.
Right.
If there's another instrument underneath it that's occupying some of the same space.
Gotcha.
So it really just depends on the song. There's no rhyme or reason to it. Yeah.
Very cool. Do you have a question?
My name is Marcy, RA.
Hey.
I was wondering, how was your experience working on Beyonce's 4 album?
Oh, that project was amazing. Yeah, I mean, she's just a different beast. She's a different level, like her work ethic. You know, I thought I worked really hard, and I did. I mean, interning, I was doing 100 hours a week, and it was hard work. She's a different animal when it comes to that. She really has set herself like leaps and bounds above what any other artist I've ever worked with. The amount of effort and dedication to the craft. And, you know, I've always said, she's such a talented artist, and a lot of people are born with talent, and that's great. Now, she's probably born with it and also has 20 years of doing it and is just incredible. And of course, you know, she's, you know, beautiful and she can dance and she has all of the ingredients. But what makes her, lots of people have that. Lots of people can sing and dance and are beautiful and make good songs. But her work ethic is just a different level. I mean, there was a session where we stayed in the studio for 36 hours straight, no sleep. And I'm like just struggling to stay awake at this point. And she's recorded 6 full songs, lead vocals, background vocals, we comped the vocals, 6 full songs. If I get through 1 song in a day with an artist, now generally I don't do a lot of recording anymore, really just for the Chainsmokers, quite frankly. But if we get through 1 song in a day, that was a great day. It was a productive day. And that's for any artist. With her to sit and grind through 6 songs is like, it's a different level of dedication to it. And so, yeah, I have nothing but great things to say about her. She's the queen. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, my name is Guillermo. I'm in Music
Hey.
Pro. First of all, thank you. I had a great time looking at this, and I've also seen previous videos of you doing the same thing, so thank you.
Thanks for coming.
And my question is, you've worked with amazing talents like Beyonce, the Chainsmokers, and in this case, the Chainsmokers are producer DJs. What do Alex and Drew have individually that make them the Chainsmokers, that they have brought them the success that they have, from your point of view that you receive the raw material and are also in the studio with them? So,
Yeah, I mean, first of all, they work really hard. They both have really great ears, which is, that's a skill in and of itself. To be able to know what's hot, it comes down to taste, right? And not everybody knows what's hot. I'm sure a lot of you guys have your favorite artists and they put out a record, you're like, man, what is this garbage? You know, it's hard to stay on top for a long time. It really is. Because music shifts so quickly, and they both have really great ears. Drew is really the more musician producer, although Alex is like, while we were in the studio, he's doing piano lessons every single day. Like, you know, each of them are trying to improve in various areas. But Drew's an incredible producer, knows how to make a track, knows how to write a song. He's writing a lot of the lyrics too. He's singing on some of the songs. And Alex is really the glue. He's the A&R. He's finding, you know, like on Roses, for example, like he found Roses. He finds all these amazing vocalists and brings them into the fold. And yeah, he's sort of the A&R. He's the glue that kind of holds everything together. He was also started the group and was the first DJ. And so yeah, they both add their own elements to make it. You know, the sum of the parts is great. What's the phrase? Help me out here. Don't give me a George Bush moment. But yeah, I mean, it's like 1 + 1 = 3 with them, you know? So yeah,
Well,
and they both offer different things to what the group is, and then I sort of come in and support that. You know, I really try to support Drew with the production stuff and just be another ear for him to bounce ideas off of. Sometimes that's important. It's not about physically doing it. It's just about being that other ear in the room to offer another opinion. And the other opinion doesn't always get chosen, but at the very least, being able to have that conversation and not be working in a silo is important for any artist. And I think that's kind of where I come in and offer that. And then, of course, the final mixing and just finishing a record. And, you know, I'll go to mastering because they're on tour and aren't able to make it. So I'll go to mastering, and they trust that I'm going to be able to get that done and make sure that it sounds right. All that.
Do you find that this is a shift in the way that business is being done? Like, this wouldn't be your typical workflow with every artist out there, right? So,
but you know what? There isn't a typical workflow. Every artist is unique, and every artist has their own idiosyncrasies and ways of doing things that they want to do. Every artist sends me stems differently. You know, some artists, they're like, no, I love how my vocals sound. They'll print their effects on the vocals. And despite me saying, you know, it'd really be nice to have dry vocals, they're like, no, I love that. Just, you know, get the drums sounding right. So yeah, there is no way of doing things. But to your point, it's a lot easier. You don't need studios anymore. You can make music on laptops. You can send stems around. It's very easy to do all that.
kind of my point. I think like
yeah.
musicians are becoming much more in the mix of it all, whereas before I think record labels were kind of the middle guy for a lot of
Yeah, I
things
mean, there's
that
a lot
took
less
place, right?
development happening at the labels now. So the
Yep.
labels are generally signing established talent. I'm sure a lot of you guys are finding new artists that are unsigned on Spotify or SoundCloud all day. Artists who are great. And eventually they might get signed to a label, but when they get signed to a label, it's because they've built a fan base with all of us. And they're already getting a ton of streams. And so the label's not across the board, but generally speaking, they're not investing in the complete unsigned, you know, they're not developing a ton of Biebers anymore, right?
Right.
It's from nothing.
Right.
Yeah, so
Well,
that's a bit of a shift.
And that's where artists are really more involved in the production to the point of like getting in contact with the mixer and having that
Yeah, I
relationship.
mean, artists are completing records.
Yeah.
They're handing in finished albums at this point.
Right.
But again, everybody's different. Some artists need the label support and some don't.
Right.
And so I think labels have learned to adapt to that, where sometimes their A&R is like almost another producer, and then other times an A&R is really more an administrator, helping book the studio and make sure that schedules line up and make sure that everybody is where they need to be. And so that just depends on who the artist is, and the labels have really learned to adapt to project by project, addressing everybody a little differently.
And that's where you as a mixer have had to adapt to that as well, like
Yeah.
that switch and change. So that's very important to know, I think.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks for the question.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Nate. In music production.
What's up, man?
How you doing? And great shirt, by the way. I had a question
it.
about the drums and the low end. You
Sure.
said specifically that for this one, you didn't really add much, but I noticed that the kicks kind of have like a sub to them.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering did you receive it that way, or is it something you do specifically?
Well, on this song, what am I doing here? I'm boosting like 1.2 dB at 92 hertz on the kick. I'm boosting a little of the low mids for some punchiness, a dB at what, 200 hertz maybe? 220 hertz. And then making it a little brighter just for some texture. I mean, I can take everything off the drums, but usually I'm not, especially with them, I'm usually not doing a ton of stuff to the drums. They're dance DJs. Before me, they were making records that were killing in the clubs before I ever touched them. So what I find with most of the DJs is they have a relatively good handle on mixing. When it comes down to really fine-tuning things for radio, for example, that's where they might need a little help. But they know how to make a record bump in the club. They don't need me for that. So, wait. So I'm actually taming a lot of the drums. So this second layer didn't actually exist though, so that's why the snare's louder there. Yeah, so it's just adding a little bit of low end, and then this whole layer, this clap effects, was basically just a copy of this that I did, and you're sort of just getting some reverb tail on it. And that's just to really kind of, it felt like the clap was a little too tight. So that adds just a little length on it. So that's really the extent of what I was doing on the drums. There wasn't a ton of stuff. It's little small brush strokes, nothing crazy. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Vincent. I'm in music production.
What's up, man?
What's up? So yeah, great mixing. I love how your process is really, really intuitive when you're working on this. You're kind of blurring the line between like mixing and producing a little bit.
Yeah.
So like adding your own elements. I want to know like the intricacies of working with the Chainsmokers. So what was that like? Like the process, they'd send a stem and you'd say, remove this a little bit or
well,
take
first
that
of all,
out.
they weren't sending anything because for this record, they moved to LA. We lived very close to each other. We were locked into Westlake and we were in the room. So,
Same complex, yeah.
yeah, usually the way it works is they had a few songs that were already done. This was one of the first ones done, and Paris was also, because that was the first single that came out. So I was in the main room at Westlake, I think the C room or E room or something like that, mixing. And then Drew would be in the lounge in headphones working on the next track, right? Finalizing whatever he needs to do. And then periodically, middle of the afternoon, he'll come in and say, hey, let's take a break. I have some things I want to play you. So he'll play me where he's got the track, and then we'll kind of talk about it and listen to it and make some decisions. And then really, I was just a second ear to bounce ideas off of. So it's like, maybe that sound isn't right, or it's a little too harsh. Let's find a similar thing, but that does this. I'll sort of describe that, and then he'll say, okay, great, awesome. And a lot of times he'll already know what he's doing, and he just wants me to sort of reinforce that. And if I don't reinforce it and I have another idea, then that's when we have to have a conversation, think about it, because clearly, but a lot of times we're on the same page.
Cool. So
Like,
it's like,
yeah, I had an idea, I had to do that anyways, and then he'll go back and he'll know that, okay, that's the right decision. And so a lot of it's just trying to be efficient so that he's not spending days and days working on a song, and then we get it in the studio to mix, and it's like, it's not right. Go back, we got to go back and fix some things. So it's constantly throughout the day bouncing ideas around, and yeah.
cool. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Taylor. I'm in music production. So as you mentioned earlier, it's difficult to get to the top of the industry and stay there. There's a lot of people who will go and they'll release like a really hot single and then just like you never really hear from them again.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to know is, what is the best piece of advice that you've received throughout your career that you carry with you as far as like keeping your work going and staying at the top of your field?
Yeah, so, I mean, first of all, I think that applies more to producers, songwriters, and artists, right? As a mixer, a pop song today and a pop song yesterday and 10 years ago, whatever, I mean, gradually the sound's going to evolve, and I'm going to be informed by what's happening at radio and other things like that. So, I mean, if you listen to pop records from 10 years ago, they sound differently than they do today. And that's just a slow evolution that's constantly happening, and every season, every year, a new trend comes in, and then that trend gets sort of integrated into the fabric of what pop music is for a little bit, and then people freak that and remix that, and then it becomes something else. As a mixer, I don't have to worry about it too much. I mean, I do, but not too much, because I can sort of adapt to the sounds and trends that are happening. Really, for the songwriters and artists and creators, the problem is you have a songwriter who's on fire, writing hit after hit after hit, and then all of a sudden, we get tired of that sound, and then some other new songwriter comes around and does something totally brand new and exciting, and then everybody jumps on that bandwagon. And then this other songwriter who was doing their own thing, who was hot 6 months ago, now they're like, wait, do I have to copy somebody else now? No, I'm great. I'm just going to keep doing what I do. The ones who are awesome stick around for a long time. The ones who had a moment, they struggle. And sometimes it's hard. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, and that time is sort of past, it's tough to get the masses to pay attention to it. And so that's what I think it is. So to me, it's just paying attention to what's going on and being a student of the game, so to speak, and yeah, just paying attention, listening, and then figuring it out, and all constantly learning and adapting to that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hey, I'm Bronson. I'm in the recording arts. Nice
What's
to meet you. Not much, chilling. You said you mix at home a lot. And I was just curious to knowing, like, what's your setup? Like, do you have, like, another room for it? Or do you mix it, like, in your own room, like your bed and everything?
No. I have my third bedroom is converted to a studio, so I've got, clouds in the ceiling and bass traps, and it sounds good. Although Closer, I had just moved to LA, Closer, Don't Let Me Down. I was mixing that in an apartment room, in the living room of my apartment, and with no treatment. Yeah. Now I just bought a house, so I locked in a studio. I'm like, okay, this is going to be my workspace, and so that room sounds a little better. But at the end of the day, I've mixed on airplanes. I don't really care. That's what I was saying. I'm not a gearhead, and I can learn to adapt. So all it takes is 10 minutes of listening to a few references in a new environment, saying, okay, this is what this sounds like. All right, now I know how this mix needs to sound like in this room. Yeah. So I'm usually pretty good at that, and I think one of the strengths that I have is I'm happy moving around and mixing anywhere. I'm not confined to a room in my house. I'm not confined to any studio. I literally I will mix on a plane. I was mixing in the hotel last night.
Do you have like a special pair of headphones you use, or can you use like whatever you want? Like,
yeah, I think I have them on me.
Oh, nice.
Sennheiser HD650s. Love these. Take them everywhere. They sound amazing. And the reason I love these is so I mix on Genelecs, and to me they sound like the closest thing to what originally a 1031 and now an 8351 sounds like. So yeah, I love these. Great headphones.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Hey, what's up?
What's happening?
My palms are sweaty. Okay.
Knees weak, arms ahead.
What does that mean?
Already.
It means my knees are weak. Okay. Mom spaghetti. My question is, okay, I literally just started learning about engineering.
Okay.
So I'm kind of trash when it comes to mixing and mastering. So what I want to ask is like, what do all of your sessions have in common? Like, do you have this process when you're compressing? Like, do you always do the same patch for like the kick or the bass or whatever?
No, absolutely not. That's like the worst way to mix because every song is different, every kick is different, every snare is different, and so you kind of have to look at a whole session holistically and say, all right, what do I want this to sound like? That's the hardest part. Learning the gear is not hard. It's training your ear to know what the finish line sounds like ahead of time, and then it's easy. Then you just make decisions that lead you towards that finish line. But you have to know what you want it to sound like. And that takes time. That's just practice. When I first got out of Full Sail, I couldn't mix anything. It was horrible. But after watching my mentor mix hundreds of songs, I slowly and gradually started to learn like what he was doing, why he was making decisions, why this sounds like this. Just keep doing it. Just keep mixing. Eventually, one day it'll click. It took me about maybe 2 years out of Full Sail, and I had assisted Duro on hundreds of mixes, and then one day it just clicked. I was like, oh, I get it now. And then I tried my own mix, and I actually, it was the second mix I tried for Duro, but I actually got a mix on Fabulous's first album. So the first project I ever engineered, I got one mix on it, and the CEO of the label and my boss and the guy who mixed the entire album is one of the best mix engineers in the world, and he said your mix was good enough to be on it. And that was from studying him for 2 years. So just keep doing it, and eventually one day it clicks. You'll see.
I'd love to buy you a pizza one day. There's a pizza place by the Marcar VR.
Yeah, I'm hungry. Go get it right now.
Sweet. I'll go. Pizza.
But hold on, if you get it for me, you're gonna have to get it for everybody.
All my money's on Full Sail's intuition, so.
I'll see you after. Yeah.
All right, sweet.
Thank you, though.
I love some feedback.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd say also make sure that you're asking for feedback on your mixes, and don't take things personally. Like, if someone doesn't like your mix, don't personalize that, but keep working on your craft. Keep getting better at it. Find the commonality in your mix that starts to please a lot of ears, where everybody's giving you really good feedback on it. And I don't mean mom and dad. Mom and dad will always like your mix, right? Find some people that are professionals in the industry, that can give you some honest feedback.
My mom doesn't know what a mix is.
Right.
So.
Right. Oh, it always sounds
if your
good.
parents are giving you comments on your mix, they really know what's going on. But also reference.
Yeah, reference, absolutely.
Yeah. Songs that you love, pay attention. Figure out how loud is their kick drum? How loud is their vocal? How loud is their snare? How does it impact? Is it a tighter sound? Okay, I need to do a little more compression on it. Is it a washier sound? Add a little reverb. Like, try to decipher what's going on. This is why I love bringing this back, because now you can actually see what's going on and sort of demystify the whole thing. But eventually, when you see enough of this, you'll be able to hear a song on the radio and see all of this without actually having the session. You'll just hear it on the radio, and you'll be able to pick out every single element of the song, or most of them, and know what each one of them are doing and what purpose they serve in the greater song, right? So, reference.
Cool. Yep.
What's up, man?
Hey, I'm Tyler Callahan. I'm a music production student. How are you today, man?
Pretty good.
Awesome. Listening
How
to
are
this
you?
song.
You have a good breakfast?
Yeah, dude. It was pretty awesome.
I had a good one, too.
It was some great coffee.
Yeah. I don't drink coffee, actually, but...
Yeah. So listening to this, what really stood out to me was kind of the really ethereal guitars. They were just really wide and all over the place. So my question really is, how do you treat them? I guess like the electric guitars, was a lot of the processing done beforehand, like the time-based stuff, or was it something that you added later?
Okay, well, let me see, because each of them... Okay, so let's use this one, for example. Is that the guitar you're talking about? One of them?
Yeah, one of them, and also all of them kind of as a whole.
Okay. So, see this spread knob here? I don't know if you're going to hear it, because I'm probably not, but let me know, nod if whatever. So this is with no spread on it?
Yeah, yeah.
And that pushes it
like
way
huge.
out to the side.
Right.
Normally I don't put it to 100, but on this I really spread it out wide. I wanted that to just kind of be ringing off to the sides there. This is a SPL Vitalizer. It's made by SPL, but it's through Plugin Alliance. Love this plugin. I use it on a ton of things. You've seen I pulled it up a number of times. And it's just one of those really cool things. It has a little compression on it, a little EQ stuff, and some spread. And it's just, to me, it's like my secret weapon sometimes. And let me see. I mean, there's definitely some processing that was probably printed. Yeah, so they processed that reverb on it.
Right.
That's Bill Rocco, who is Coldplay's engineer. Incredible guy, really good friend of mine. And yeah, I mean, he does an awesome job, and he knows how they want their guitars to sound. So why am I going to reinvent that wheel? I mean, he knows exactly what they want. He was probably in the studio with them, cutting it, and they said, hey, let's add this, let's add this. And so I got a stem for that. And then on this last guitar, it looks like I'm doing more on it. Taking out a lot of the low end from that, because I was muddying things up. Again, a lot of spread on it. And then I think just a side chain. A light side chain, just to make it kind of glue into the mix.
Right.
So yeah, it's a combination of both. But that SPL Vitalizer, awesome plugin.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man. Actually, how many layers of guitar are on that song right now? What, like 5, 6?
So all these red tracks, I try to like color code certain things. All these red tracks are the electric guitars, and there's another acoustic guitar track that was in that drop. So there's 5, but they're not all playing at once. So in the verses, there's one. Here, there's another one. Right, that more moving one, and then at the end, there's a maximum of 3 layers playing at once.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man.
Awesome. Thanks.
Cool. Hey, how's it going?
What's up?
My name is Steven. I'm in the recording knowledge program here. I noticed that you have reverb directly on the inserts of some of your tracks. We learned in the way to send it to a send. What was your reason for affecting the entire signal by putting it directly on the insert?
Okay, super easy. That's a convenience thing. So the beauty of a new laptop nowadays is that you have more than enough processing power to usually handle any session, putting new reverbs on every single one. It used to not be like that.
Yeah.
If you start putting convolution reverbs on it, you'll really bog down a session quickly. Yeah. Now that's not really a problem, so I have the freedom to do it. Now, the reason I have those reverbs on every individual track is if I had to create a new send for every different reverb I wanted for every different instrument, I would have 30 sends.
Yeah,
right?
so it's more, I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's more of a workflow
thing. It's a workflow thing. And you'll see, like, let me try and find where that's happening. I know it's happening on the live drums for sure, so let's just address that. So the live drums here, I have this, this revibe on it. And the mix on it is, where is the mix on this? I'm like blind right now. But the mix is 27%. So it's effectively the same thing, but this is just a lot easier. I can slap the reverb on, come to a nice setting and be good with it and move on. And I know I'm not going to use this reverb setting for anything else in the session. What I save all my reverb sends for is the vocals. Because then when I print vocals and I got to print an acapella, I don't have, drum returns coming through that reverb. It's just a lot easier for me to print vocals nicely and stems nicely. Yeah.
I figured because you have the newer version of the Mac, that's why you have the freedom to do that. Unfortunately, I came the month before they gave out a new Mac, so I've just been putting everything through a send.
But think about it. Okay, so here's the thing with that. Had I put it all through sends, it wouldn't have actually saved any processing power because each of those reverbs are slightly different. The value of the send reverbs is on things like vocals where I want them all treated in a similar room, but I have 20 vocal tracks, so and I want them at different volumes. So I'm going to do different sends for that. Yeah. But with guitar, for example, well, maybe I don't want that same reverb. And so whether I put it directly on the guitar track or I make a new aux, effectively, you still have to create a new instance of the reverb. So it doesn't actually help you a whole lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Couple more questions. Go ahead.
All right. This one should be quick. How you doing, man? Tony.
Really well. How are you?
In Music Pro. This is more of a music flow question on a workflow question on a broader scale.
Okay.
What was like probably the quickest or probably the fastest workflow situation and like per song? Trying to get this question together.
Fastest mix?
Per song, like what was like the fastest workflow situation and what was like the most, like one of the longest? I just want a range of how long, because I see you really active and really proactive in the mix, so.
On this album?
No, just in general.
Or in general?
Yeah, just in general, like.
I've had songs that get mixed in, 3 hours, and
Right.
it's like, oh, they love it, and it's great, and you print, and good to go. Done a song in a day. And then I've had other songs that get dragged out for weeks or even over a month. And it's not that I can get a first pass to the mix in a day, usually.
Right.
But then it's the back and forth. It's making sure the artist is happy, making sure the producer's happy, making sure the A&Rs are happy, making sure the label's happy. There's a lot of different opinions, and depending on who the artist is, everybody's going to have, more voices in that mix. And my goal is to make sure that everybody is happy with the end result. Sometimes it's tough, and that process can get dragged out. But usually, it's not the initial mix doesn't take very long.
Oh.
It's the comments, it's the changes, it's the opinions that get added to it, and that's cool. That's what it's about. Is my job is to please the client. So if it takes a few extra days, then so be it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, just one more quick one right over here.
Hey. Hey, DD Swivel. What's
Hey.
up?
What's up?
My name's Stephanie. I'm in the music production program here. And I'm mainly a vocalist, songwriter. I play guitar. Of course, I know how to produce a little bit. But what I wanted to know, I kind of have like two questions.
Okay.
The first one is, when you're working with an artist, what are the major things that you really like about working with them? Like, what are some main characteristics that make the workflow easier? And what's some things that you just like are absolutely like do not, that are turn you off from wanting to work with them, that you're just don't want to waste your time?
There's nothing really that turns me off from working with the art. I mean, the first thing is it's just a respect thing. And I've been very fortunate in my career where most, if not all of the artists that I've worked with have really respected me. And at first that was because I worked under Duro, and so he was sort of my industry bodyguard in many ways. So I would never really get the disrespect. But there's a few artists that I've worked with, and I won't name any names, that aren't always the most respectful, and then you move on from that real quick. So I don't let that bother me. Everybody's different. Everybody has their own struggles and problems and insecurities, and I don't let if they project that on me, I'm not offended by that,
Of
or
course.
it doesn't bother me. At the end of the day, I just
Right.
want to make good records.
Right.
Whether you're a signed artist, a big, huge artist, or an independent artist. I mean, I'm working with a number of independent artists right now that are incredible, that I'm like in love with their music. And so I'm really happy working on those projects too.
Cool.
So
For me, thank you. For me, a big thing is being able to vibe with the producers so they can understand where you're coming from to get
course.
the song out.
Yeah.
So in the event that you've been working with somebody and things aren't going the way you want to do, how do you end up discontinuing the project without burning a bridge and overstepping?
I don't discontinue. First of all, if they've hired me and they've paid me, my job is to finish the mix.
Right.
No matter what. No matter what. So
I guess this applies to more
if-
when you were starting.
Yeah, I mean, well, even when I was starting, when I went freelance, I mean, I'm being paid to do a job. If something's not going well, then luckily I haven't been in many situations where people are disrespectful. That's where I'll draw a line. If you're talking to me
Okay.
crazy, I'm gonna just get up and leave.
Of
And
course.
you've already paid me, so sucks to be you.
Sucks to suck.
But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, my job is to deliver a mix. So if we're not gelling creatively, then at the end of the day, I'm just going to do exactly what they want. And I might say, you know what? Don't put my name on it. It's cool.
Okay.
And then they're happy. They got the mix that they want. And, but that is so rare. I can count.
Right.
That's only happened a couple times. And it's cool. I mean, some people are picky and some people don't want to hear what you're trying to offer. And and then I usually don't work with them again.
That's just that.
Yeah.
All right.
All
Thank
right,
you.
guys. I'm sorry we're not going to be able to get to everybody's questions today. We're having to wrap this up at the end. We got other
I'll answer everybody's
events coming.
questions. We'll go out there. Yeah.
But thanks so much for coming. Let's give a big hand for DJ Swivel for being here today. Thank you so much. DJ.
Thank you guys for coming. Appreciate it.
Please make your way to the same door that you came in.